Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. And as I'm recording this, it is the late afternoon in Melbourne, the day before Good Friday. And I have the privilege of speaking to a man who he won't mind me sharing this, but he said, I'm not really a morning person. So can we actually push this back an hour or two so that I'm at my best? Mr. Jimmy Cannon, all the way from the UK, world-renowned speaking coach, singer, saxophonist, and all sorts of things in between. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Hey Darren, wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for allowing me on the podcast. Especially the Antipodean wokeness or wakeness in this time of day. No, it's a completely different time of day for you. I'm just not a morning person, as you can tell, because I'm already spluttering and stuttering my way around this. Yeah.
Well, I must admit, when you first jumped onto YouTube, onto Zoom, I was just looking at
Yeah.
YouTube on the screen there.
Yeah.
You had a beautiful photo, as most people do within
Ah.
their Zoom account, and it was you with a very lovely facial expression, which I think was a straw. Was it a straw?
I shall not for the radio listeners. I will replicate the which is. Shall I tell you about the straw? Shall I tell you about what that is?
Yeah, there's got to be a story behind it, surely.
It's good. Well, there is a story behind it. The story is that there's a gentleman called Ingo Tietz who is a Swedish vocal pedagogue,
Mm.
and he came up with. I mean, he's really a bit of a guru and a genius in voice circles. And the thing of when I got into how long have we got when I when I got into teaching singing. So I've been a singer for a very long time and a saxophonist. And when I got into singing teaching, a friend of mine said, Jimmy, do you need, the gigs were kind of like gigs, as anybody knows, as an actor or a singer, are just up and down. It really
Mm.
depends, you just have to be lucky. And you
Yeah.
have to be in the moment, and you have to be networking and all that stuff, which is just any other business.
Yeah.
And in fact we moved out of London, so I was in London for 30 odd years as a professional singer, and we moved out of London, and a friend of mine said, do you want some work teaching? And I said, yeah, great. And what another friend of mine said, Jimmy, you are just going to be in this quagmire of controversial ideas and concepts around the voice and singing, because there's lots of different ways of thinking about teaching singing. So
Yes.
there's the bel canto operatic way of classical singing, and then there's the speech level singing, which comes from Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson. Anyway, blah blah blah. I'm going off track, but there's and I thought I can sing. I had a couple of lessons, and I thought, right, I need to get some either proper singing lessons, or I need to, find out what's going on. So I did that a long time. That was about 20 years ago.
Mm.
Cut a very, very long story short, which we can go back to. I ended up doing a master's in voice pedagogy through University of Wales. And it led me down a path of studying the voice and the physiology of the voice, etc., which was really fascinating. And so, having said that, there is still a lot of controversy and a lot of discussion around these, especially on Facebook,
Yeah. Well, it
around
must
the
be
voice.
true if it's on Facebook.
Yeah, it must be true. It's absolutely exactly. So just whatever you read is completely true. So one of the things that you learn when you're learning about the voice is what's called semi-occluded vocal tract exercises. And these are exercises that take the energy away from the vocal cords or vocal folds.
Mm.
And that one of the exercises that we do, well, I do, and we do as singers, is called the straw exercise. Now you can stick the straw in a glass of water, and the idea is that the really easy one is, I say it's really easy, but we could do this actually, is a glass of water, and you've got to keep the bubbles going, right? So you've got to put the straw in the water, and you push air, you blow air through the straw, and the bubbles come up, and you keep the bubbles going. The idea is that you're controlling the out breath, you're controlling the flow of air. So when you're speaking,
Yeah.
you're taking the energy, acoustic energy away from the vocal folds, and therefore not straining the voice. And there's lots of great, amazing things. So the other thing to do with the straw is is to make a hum through it, and I'll do it now so your listeners and you and can hear. So, can you hear that?
Yeah.
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 So,
Yeah.
so you do that a few times, 4 or 5 times. So you're humming. Make sure there's no air escaping around the mouth, no air coming out of the nose, and you put a lot of energy into it. And we can talk about that in a minute. You put a
Yeah.
lot of energy into it from the abdominal muscles, which is called diaphragmatic breathing, which is another thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And how long have we got? 4 or 5 hours?
Yeah, this is like a Joe Rogan podcast, 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. I'll get the cigars. Right. So, and then you do that 4 or 5 times. What you should feel is a resonance in the mask area. So not only does it help spread the acoustic energy around the body, so it
Mm.
takes away from the larynx, it also gives a vibration, a feeling of resonance in the mask area, which your mask area is around your cheeks, your nose, your eyes, the bottom, your nasal passages, basically.
Yeah.
And it allows you to project the voice more. So with originally the mask area was an area of resonance that opera singers could cut through the orchestra,
Mm.
and that developed into a musical theater type of voice.
Mm.
So that sort of do you wanna be rich? Do you wanna be tired? Like I'm just making that up. Freudian slip. Um, all that stuff. So that sort of sound allows you to project your voice more or cut through the
Mm.
orchestra originally, but in speaking and in communication, it's a way to cut through the crowd, cut through the team, make your voice heard without straining. And also coming back, I knew there was a circle to come back here
Yeah.
with your audience, with sales. It's a way to cut through the noise without sounding aggressive or without sounding arrogant or salesy, I
Mm.
suppose.
Mm. It's a great thing you just talked about there because as you were talking, I'm remembering some of the great performers that I've seen, and one of the most amazing performers is a singer by the name of Michael Bublé. You've probably heard of him, and we've seen him when he's been in Australia. I think we've seen him about 3 or 4 times, but he changes his repertoire a lot. But there's always one song he does towards the back end, and typically in the encore. And I can't remember the sound of the name of the song, but about 3/4 of the way through the song, and he's in a big auditorium like the Tennis Centre here in Australia, which is probably 15,000 people.
Yep.
And he then all of the microphones get switched off. The orchestra or the band stops playing, and he sings about a third or a quarter of the song a cappella
Mm.
without any microphone, and he manages to fill the auditorium with his voice. And
Yep.
it's just an incredible example of projection, because one of the things I did want to ask you was
Mm-hmm.
for people who are in the public speaking sphere and even
Mm-hmm.
people who are doing pitches and keynotes, and they may not necessarily be their prime role, they very often get sore larynx, sore throat. It sounds like they're screaming. It sounds like they're trying to sound bigger because their volume is it. They're trying to yell.
Yep.
Some techniques to be able to do that, because I'm
Sure.
I'm very big on voice projection, but also, as you described,
Mm.
resonance within the voice itself, so it has
Yep.
credibility. Because
Yep.
a lot of the time when we're speaking, and people who have deeper voices have a higher level naturally of credibility, because it's just a fact.
Yep.
But even people with higher pitched voices can still generate levels of credibility through the way they use their tonality.
Absolutely.
So I love, before we delve into some of the, I guess, the nuances of voice and how we can use that to good effect and everything we're going to talk about today. So just so listeners know, Everything we're doing today is for coaching training purposes only, but it's all based on ethics, good ethics, not dodgy convincing and not dodgy manipulation.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, that's great. That's interesting. Yeah, that's yeah.
so with your background, because I normally, and thank you for giving us a bit of the background in terms of your singing career and then teaching.
Mm,
The things you do today, the fact that you're working with leaders from all over the world and helping them with their voice, and we're just talking about one guy based in Australia who you've been working with.
mm.
Was this something that you just fell into through, I guess, the opportunity that teaching provided you, or was there a conscious decision you say, you know what, I've got something here that perhaps nobody else really does in this market that can really resonate with people? What was it that made you do what you do today?
Okay, so the the story that I use, which is true, is a chap that I met at a party. I was very lucky to be involved in a Eurovision song, and I co-wrote a Eurovision song that off the top of my head, I can't think what it's called. A long time ago, but I was at a party, and it was just it's a pub. We were in a pub in North London, and and I was talking to a chap. He was a friend of a friend, as you do, and we got talking, and he this is a long time ago, but he turned out to be in advertising, and he said, "Look, I've got a pitch. I've got to do. We have to pitch our ideas every
Yeah.
week to the team, and I hate doing it." He said, I really hate doing it. I love my job. I get really nervous, and I just need if we don't get any training, we don't get anybody coming in.
Yeah.
I would love to do some training with you, and I thought, well, this is at the time I was singing. I
Yes.
wasn't, but as you know, as a singer, we know how to project our voice. We know how to
Mm.
sustain and maintain our voice. So that was he wasn't and he never became a client actually, but that was the seed that sort of started it off. I will be absolutely transparent with you, and I don't think I've said this to anybody apart from friends and family, is that I needed to make more money. I
Yeah.
needed to and I feel slightly guilty about this as a I don't know why, but as English, maybe an English middle class white guy, I don't know why, but I suppose also, it's this is really interesting, the whole sort of ethics. So you mentioned ethics,
Mm.
sales ethics, and that's been a real transformation for me about having to sell my own product, what I do, which
Yes.
is you and I could talk about this for hours, and
Yeah.
I'd love to pick your brains as well, but. Um, the the whole idea is that I got to a point in my life in my sort of late 30s 40s where I've got two children, we want to improve our lifestyle, and I was forgive the French. I was fannying around for years as a jazz singer and saxophonist. That was what I wanted to do. I set my goal
Yes.
in being a successful musician. I believe I got to that point in that I managed to carve a career for about 10 years of just performing with
Yeah.
nothing else, which was is really hard to do, generally speaking. And we could talk about that, but what I realized that there was I walked into I was doing a lot of singing teaching, a lot of I was teaching at quite a couple of universities in London and colleges, etc., that do music degrees, and I was teaching performance. I was the module leader for performance, but you get an hourly rate. You're
Yeah.
paid for your time, right? You go in, and I was doing 2-3 days a week, and then doing some gigs, and I was making a living, but it just wasn't really enough. It's nowhere near enough, especially at the climate as it is at the moment, to
Mm.
get on a property ladder or anything like that. So I thought I had to raise the bar in terms of the threshold of what I was earning, and over a year or two of researching and studying this, I realized that I could probably. I had a mentor, and I worked with a mentor for maybe a year, and he told me that I could be charging a lot more money because I'm getting a result for people,
Mm.
and that result is a value, and that value means a lot more than a 17-year-old going into a university to learn how to sing like Beyonce.
100%.
And that's really, it might just be because it's in the morning and I'm just being completely transparent with you, but that's it. But however, I would just say as a caveat that I absolutely love what I do. And I tell you what, I love what I do. It's not just the voice training. It's it's seeing people transform from people that aren't very confident in their voice and don't know how to use their voice
Yeah.
to start using their voice in a very effective way.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, there's a number of points I could delve into. I'll just pick up one, and that is when people are working with a voice coach or a speech coach or a sales leadership coach, a lot of people think, oh, geez, that's quite expensive because they have a frame of reference that they might be equating that to what they get paid on an hourly basis or a daily basis. But what they probably don't recognize or want to recognize and understand is that when they work with somebody like you, they're not just paying for your time, they're paying for all of your expertise and all the preparation, all the hardship you've had to go through to get to the point now where you can actually help somebody become a bit more of a faster track to quote unquote success rather than just pay an hourly rate. So
Yeah.
it's and it comes down to the value. And if you've got people who are getting definitive value out of what you're showing them and helping them with to the point where they can increase their influence, then the sky's the limit. And you're probably even now with what you're charging, because I have the same conversation with myself.
Mm,
Man, you're not charging enough, right? You should be charging more.
mm.
And it's just an evolutionary thing that we continue to have these
Yeah.
conversations
Yeah.
with ourselves. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. If I could just chip in there, sorry to,
yeah, no,
yeah,
please.
yeah, for sure. I, it's a strange thing, it's okay. So I'll give you an example. I, as a saxophonist, managed to. I was very lucky, and I ended up playing with Tom Jones. I did a tour with Tom Jones, and that was the pinnacle of my career, right?
Yeah,
Really interesting thing is that nothing changed about me. Nothing changed about the way I played or the standard of. I didn't suddenly become this, this miracle saxophone player. There are 1,000 saxophone players that could do the gig,
yeah,
right? I just happened to be in the right place at the right time for various other reasons as well, and but for me, it gave me credibility for myself.
mm,
It gave me the confidence that I needed to do what I do.
mm,
So I'll give an example with what I do now is that I ended up doing also not only the masters in voice pedagogy, but I did two things. I studied acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a behavioral therapy, which uses I could talk about that for hours. Um, and really bore your listeners to death. And that is about mindfulness and present moment exercises, committed action towards values, overarching kind of theme. And the other thing I did was a leadership coaching course, which was
mm,
absolutely amazing. And a friend of
mm,
mine said, Jimmy, if you're going to go down the corporate world and you're going to, help leaders improve the quality of their voice and how they communicate with their teams, you should do a leadership coaching qualification because that's good. You're going to be more respected. There's going to be some credibility. So I feel with
yeah,
those pronged, that would do, three-pronged approach. I try to say that. Um, that's really helped me personally have the skills and the tools to use to help people in a more holistic way, but also give me the feeling of credibility for myself as
yeah.
well.
And that's probably the most important thing because I was going to ask you because in the time that I've been working for myself for 10 years. So I left corporate in 2015.
Mhm,
And I've done a coaching degree. I've got all
mhm,
the NLP qualifications. I'm accredited in all the disc profiling and reach profiling, all the different profiling. There hasn't been a single organization or a single person in the last 10 years that has asked me the question, hey, Darren, can you show me your qualifications?
no, 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 exactly. I didn't. The Tom Jones's tour manager never said to me, Jimmy, can I see your grade 8 saxophone, please?
Yes.
No, no,
Yes.
never had that. What that is, and you know this, especially having studied NLP. I'd love to ask you about that. In fact, my
Yeah.
mentor was an NLP practitioner, so
Yeah.
that shows a lot. Um, that's the the main thing is a personal being personable and having that communication trait and being someone that is interested in other people, because I feel that we're both interested in other people, quite deeply.
Well, let's be brutally honest, right? And fully
Mm.
transparent. We cannot
Yep.
do what we do if you didn't have an interest in another human being and helping them become better, right? Because it's
Absolutely.
and I do a lot of leadership work with obviously leadership teams, sales teams that are looking to improve their leadership, their influence. And I it sounds like a broken record, but literally every session that I run, whether this is a repeat client or a new client, I'm always saying you got to realize this is not about you. It never has been and never will be. And you've got to think about how you best serve your audience, how you best serve your client, how you best serve your team.
Mm,
And
mm,
so from a coaching point of view, and certainly working with voice, because we're going to talk about credibility and how we,
mm,
create credibility and influence with the people that we're working with,
mm, mm,
you
mm.
can't make it about yourself, right? You
No.
cannot make it about yourself. So I'd love to start because we're going to talk about all the different elements of voice that can create credibility in a message.
Hmm.
You mentioned before that the person you're working, I think it was the person in Australia, or you said no,
Mm,
it may not have been, but you said the client or the person who maybe didn't end up being a client is saying I'm quite anxious or quite nervous
mm,
about presenting to a team or
mhm.
presenting to a CEO or whatever the case might be. Why do you think, from your perspective, why do you think it is that people would rather die? I know that sounds extreme,
That is true.
than present
Mm, mm.
publicly.
Ah, right, right.
What do you
I've
think
got
that
loads.
is?
I've got loads of thoughts on that. Okay, so it is. I mean, that's actually a statistic. When I looked at it, when I thought to myself, is there a business here? And then I realized that 79%, it changes every year, obviously, of the American public suffer from public speaking anxiety. So that's what I ended up doing in my MA. I went down the road of performance anxiety and public speaking anxiety, and there are huge amount of people that are scared to speak in public. And what does that mean? Well, it means presentations, pitches, conversations, socially, professionally, informally, formally, etc. Wedding speech, could be anything at all. So, and we are all. I'm incredibly nervous. When I'm nervous now. I'm not that. You're very very good at doing your job, so that's great. So I feel very comfortable. We had a wonderful chat before, and I know that you and I are on the same level, and we're going to get on. There's not a barrier there at all. But the barrier for most people is the perception of themselves,
Yeah.
and that is really fascinating to me. In that, people when they come on a discovery call, they talk about their voice, they talk about how they're not being heard, how they're just not getting through, and what generally happens, what the result of the conversation, or when we deep dive into what is really going on, it's mainly a perception of themselves and how they
Mm.
feel they're coming across. So they're very self-conscious of of how they're being perceived by other people. And you know as well as I do that generally speaking, people are thinking about what they're having for tea. They're not that concerned. Depends on the scenario, obviously, but they're not
Yeah.
that concerned about you at all.
That's it.
Nobody cares about you. Everybody
They
cares
couldn't give
about
a
right.
shit.
Nobody gives a shit about you. So they care, depending. They care about when's lunch, or what's the ROI, or can I improve this, or whatever it is. So that I think that's the key thing that we work on is actually to be to be serious for a moment, is to diffuse negative cognitive thoughts that might
Mm.
be around, which are all around. So we are constantly thinking. I tell you what I'm thinking now. I'm thinking, get to the point, Jimmy. That's what I'm thinking, right?
Jimmy.
Stop waffling around and just get to the point and tell Darren what he needs to know and what his listeners know. Give him the results and the answer. But what you've done very, very, very cleverly is you framed the discussion on that, when we started, you said, look, how long have you got? Because, I want to get into this. I really want to
Mm,
talk to you and get involved. And that's really exciting for me because there's no pressure. There's not a huge pressure to get to the point, although let's get to the point.
mm,
So that I feel a bit more comfortable with that, and then we can really explore this. So it's about diffusing negative thoughts that might be there. Now, negative thoughts, and I will stop talking in a minute, I promise, normally appear in somatic or physiological responses. So the shortness of breath, the very fast speaking,
mm,
the trembling or the sweaty palms, or the upper chest breathing, all of those feelings are reactions to anxiety in some way. They are,
mm,
and that anxiety comes from the fight flight response that we all feel when we're given the task of, hey, Darren, can you deliver a pitch this afternoon, or can you give a
yeah.
presentation on this topic, or can whatever it might be, can you lead the presentation, right? That's the most heightened time of any presentation or pitch is 60 seconds actually before you speak, and then
Mm,
there's the actual brief itself. So there's 3 points of in heightened anxiety, which is when you're given the brief, 60 seconds before you start speaking, and then at the end,
yeah.
because at the end is that moment of, we call it where we are called the afterglow. Where in I run a local choir where we are, and it's the afterglow after the performance. We go to the pub and we have a sing and a pint, or maybe
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
And that's called the afterglow. So in that afterglow, you're thinking, did I do well? Was it good? Am I getting a good reaction? Oh my God. Oof, that feeling, right? So yes. So that where are we with that? Yeah, yeah.
Well, there's a few things in that because one of the things I wanted to ask you in terms of the work that you do is a lot of people will suffer from some form of anxiety just thinking about and placing themselves in the environment that they have to do a pitch, they have to do a presentation, they have to do a team meeting, whatever the case might be,
Hmm.
and they're literally shitting themselves, right? Because
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
making it all about themselves. They're thinking
Mhm.
about what I've got to say. I hope I don't forget anything. Hope I don't miss all the information. Hope I say the right thing, etc.,
Yep.
etc.
Yep.
So a lot of it has to be how do we help people
Hmm.
steady themselves? And I think the breathing techniques that you sort of alluded to before can help
Yep.
because when you get into it,
Hmm.
you need to be able to use your voice in an effective way to create credibility.
Hmm.
The other thing, you talk about the afterglow. One of the things that I learned very early in I guess, my mentoring career when I was learning how to present and pitch and facilitate was my mentor said, when it comes to feedback, try to avoid reflecting in the afterglow, whether it be positive or not so positive, because you're
Mm,
still going to be in a heightened state of emotion.
that's right.
And you might overemphasize how well you thought you did, or
Mm,
overemphasize how bad you thought you did.
mm, mm, mm.
Leave it a period of 12 hours or 24 hours, and then rationally think back to say, what did you do well? What did you not do well? So you can think about it rationally.
It's
Uh,
so true.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to chip in, absolutely true. I've done lots of concerts, lots of gigs in over the years, and there is that again, you're absolutely right. The afterglow, hey Jimmy, that was great, really enjoyed the gig, great, and it's normally the guy or girl sitting in the front of the audience with their arms crossed and staring at you, so, right, entertain me, lad, go on and try to entertain me, because you won't. This is a northern accent if you haven't heard that
Yeah, I love
before,
it.
right? So and that's what as an entertainer, as a speaker, you're constantly looking at the person who's just looks really, really bored and just wants to
Mm,
wants to look at their phone. So, and it's normally them that come up to you at the end of the speaking gig, or the gig, and say, that was really interesting, thanks very much, I really enjoyed that. How can I learn more, or where can I see you play again, or whatever.
yeah.
So but that adulation is a bit false, and it's a bit of an ego thing, and you do want to, absolutely, as you said, you do want to let that process, and then you can evaluate and analyze how you really performed, and a
Mm,
really, really, really good way of doing that
mm,
is to record yourself and then watch back, because that's where you get a lot of information, and that's really hard to do, as you and I know, to do. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going off on a piece. I'll let you
No,
come
no,
back.
it's a great point you make, and in fact, I was talking to somebody this morning out of the States who is a speaker coach as well, and
Mm,
she talks about how with her client she gets them to record themselves so that they can either listen back to nuances, and she's all about the filler words, removing the filler words, so you're not getting as many ums and ahs, and using the punctuation,
yep.
but as well as looking at yourself from a physiological point of view. Are you commanding the stage, commanding the audience? Are you doing something weird with your hands, etc., etc.?
Hmm.
But the interesting thing is, it's for most people, it's really difficult to listen to your own voice until you
Hmm.
keep listening and listening and listening and listening and listening, and then you realize, yeah, that's me, right? So for me, for example, my podcast, I started in 5 years ago, April
Hmm.
2020.
Hmm.
And all of the revisions that I've done and editing I've done, and now I just talk, right? It's my voice.
Yep.
I've got used to it,
Hmm.
and I have more control over how I use my voice. And I
Hmm.
think me podcasting has actually helped me presenting,
Hmm.
pitching,
Hmm.
facilitating, running
Hmm.
workshops, and things like
Hmm.
that. So I'd love from your perspective and the clients that you work with, where do
Hmm.
you start? Because there'll be people listening to this in terms of I've got to pitch externally to a key customer, but I might also have to pitch internally for new resources or a pitch of an idea or I've got to do an executive briefing.
Hmm.
Do you take people through a process that helps them increase their level of confidence, but
Hmm.
also level of competence through using their voice? Because I really want to get into some of the nuances of voice and some of the maybe the ideas you've got that people can use and walk away
Hmm.
with something practical.
Yeah, absolutely. So good. We're getting very serious now, Darren. I like this. This is good. It's great. No, that's good. Okay. So quick thing on liking the sound of your voice. Just very quickly, if you realize that actually the sound of the voice that you hear yourself is very different to what other people hear. So, an example is that what we hear is the binaural effect of the sound. So we are listening to reflections in all the cavities: head cavity, nasal passages, oral cavity, chest cavity, etc.
Yeah.
That's what we're hearing. What other people hear? Let's take it in a face-to-face situation. If you and I were in the same room,
Yes.
then what you would be hearing is the first reflection from the mouth where the sound comes out from into a solid surface back to your ear. So that's what you hear. What we're hearing at the moment, what you're hearing, is a representation of my voice because it's been gone through a analog to digital, digital analog conversion
Yeah.
that you're hearing. So it's very different. A very quick exercise if you're interested,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
To hear actually what you sound like is if you put your hand in front of your mouth, okay? And I'm going to try to be as explanatory as possible for your oral listeners. So put your hand about 2 inches away from your mouth, stand on one leg. No, don't do that. And then cup the other with your other hand, cup the opposite ear. That's it, and then bring the hand about 3 inches away from your mouth and say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's very loud and it's
Yeah.
very apparent, isn't it? And it's very
Yeah. It
resonant.
is.
Now
It
you
is.
can play around with the angle and how you just speak. Well, you do in your
Yeah.
own
Yeah.
voice. No, go
Well,
on.
it's
Yeah,
it
go on,
actually
go on.
it actually sounded Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It actually my voice sounded really deeper.
Go on. It does. That's the thing is that it will it that's the and that's well that's great
Yeah.
if that's the voice that you're looking for.
Yeah.
We hope that you like that sound. That's the idea. And most people, oh, actually that's not too bad, it sounds right,
Yeah.
so that's a really lovely way to think. You think, right, actually that's how my voice, that's the probably the most accurate representation of how your voice actually sounds. But to go into so I use three pillars, if you like, of coaching, which is your voice, presence, and confidence. So, and they, generally speaking, I use all three in my coaching.
Yeah.
In that, improving the quality and the sound of your voice gives you more confidence. Improving just as you had a colleague come on recently, talked about uh, body language, etc., nonverbal communication. So I work a lot with people that and I help them with their body alignment and their presence. So presence being how you fill the room with your voice, how you
Mm.
use your voice to create, to fill the space, but fill the space in a in the right way, rather than push away from people or push through the space.
Yes.
So that's projection, that's resonance, etc. So general, and then confidence is really, and you asked me how to start. Well, so there's various ways, but what I tend to do in my system is that we always start with the breath. So we
Hmm.
always start with, and you mentioned the breath earlier on. I don't think I've ever done a session where we haven't started with the breath. So
Mm.
we need to make sure that I'm really hesitating not to go into a whole session here, because this is what I do all day, every day, which is fine. But we need to make sure there's enough breath in the lungs to use, right? So we, generally speaking, we don't, and that's because we're breathing in an upper chest
Yeah.
way or method. So we need to make sure that we relax the belly, allow the diaphragm to contract, lower and expand the lungs as we're taking a breath in, right? And then to use the breath effectively on the out breath as we're speaking.
Mm.
So just, and this is really fascinating, and I'm more than happy to share with you this. There's quite a bit of research to say that our sympathetic nervous system is triggered by our voice and how we use our voice. So you can reverse the anxiety just by elongating the vowels as you
Hmm.
speak and controlling the breath, right? There is absolute research to say that there is a connection between the larynx, the diaphragm, and the vagus nerve to mitigate the anxiety, or to reduce the anxiety as you speak. So by controlling the out breath and using that voice to elongate the phrases, basically to lengthen the phrases as you
Yeah.
speak and really get into the vowels right, um, that helps reduce the anxiety. There's papers on this, right?
Wow.
So, and I find that when I'm working with people that are nervous to even speak, in certain situations,
Yeah.
especially. So I'm working with somebody at the moment. He happens to be doing, he's a football coach. I can't tell you who he is, but he's a football coach, and as in a English football coach, and he gets very nervous in interviews. So he's great on the pitch. He's great what he does. He's top of his game,
Yeah.
literally. And but in interviews, he freezes up. And so what we've been working on is using the breath to elongate and lengthen phrases as he's speaking. Because what he does is he does a few things. He swallows, which is called globus pharyngeus. Talk about that another time. But that's a somatic response of the anxiety. So he's creating a block in his larynx. So
Hmm.
what I do, help people do, is unblock that and help them glide through, create more flow with the sound of their voice, and lengthen the phrases. So as you lengthen the phrase as you're speaking, it reduces the anxiety. So it's really about so to answer your question, it's really, the answer is to start to speak, because then you know that the breath and the resonance of that breath is going to help you as you're speaking.
And by elongating the vowels,
Yeah,
you're literally slowing down your speech. Because one of the
absolutely.
things I've noticed with a lot of people, like I was in Vegas before Christmas doing a gig for Adobe, and I had the absolute privilege of being with a group of people, and I was in a room with a lot of people from different countries who where English was the second or third language.
Right.
So I was told, whatever you do, slow down your speech because
Hmm.
I am notorious for speeding up when I get excited about a topic. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I
And
had to
yeah.
work really hard on that and breathing.
Mhm,
But I also
mhm.
know that people who are quite anxious when it comes to trying to pitch an idea, trying to speak in front of a group, they want to do a really good job and they end up speaking quickly to get
Yeah.
through it. and therefore not breathing. So by slowing down and elongating the words, you don't
Mhm.
do it to the point where you sound drunk, but it does help. It does help you control your vagus nerve and your sympathetic nervous system to the
Yeah.
point, and it increases your level of credibility. So how has it worked for him in terms of what has he noticed? Because I'm sure that there's been a level of confidence that's now
Well, no,
improved.
so that's the thing. Yeah, and I if I could chip in again with the slowing down the rate of the voice, that's really important as well. So for him, he that's the thing is that now feels, it's a process, and it's something that he's had probably since he was 10 years old.
Yeah, okay.
Is a feeling, and a lot of people that I work with, the story is that they were made to get up and speak in class, right? They were meant to, and we all were, right? And especially in those days, we were meant to, canons, stand up and recite, whatever it might be, and so we had to stand up and talk some rubbish literature or something, and so he's had it a long time, but he is now feeling a lot more confident to speak in interviews and to share his message and to
Yeah,
share his skills and knowledge and experience. So that's a great change, that transformation that he's had. Going back to, excuse me, going back to slowing down your speech. One thing that I help my clients do is to stop speaking, and that's really that's really hard. And I get this actually from, so if you're into jazz, you'll know of two names, John Coltrane and Miles Davis. These are, they're sort of, pretty much legends
yes.
in jazz. So John Coltrane was supposedly said to Miles Davis, "Man, I can't stop. I just can't stop playing. I just keep playing and playing and playing." And Miles turns around and says, just take the horn out of your mouth, man. And so basically, it's just saying, just stop. So the idea is that you can pause at certain. There are very powerful ways to use a pause, and so if I could elaborate a little bit. So, for instance, if when you're just before you start speaking, just take a little bit of a 2-3 second pause, quite deeply before you start speaking. It gets the attention of the audience. It resets your vagus nerve, it resets your sympathetic system and reduces the anxiety slightly. In
Mm,
fact, it's a lot of research to say that a deep breath releases endorphins and reduces the heart rate. So that's a lot of practice that can be done on deep breathing. But just taking a very long breath before you speak just centers yourself, centers where you are on the stage. It gives the audience an opportunity to say, okay, this person is going to say something interesting. I'm going to listen, right? So is that switch that you're
yeah,
making on the two things. If you find that you're speaking too quickly, then stop, take a pause, take a breath, gather your thoughts. And I tell you why this is really interesting is that the audience need time. You'll know this. The audience, especially in that scenario that you were talking about, where the audience
mm,
are the natives, their native language is not it's not their first language.
that's it.
English is not their first language. So they
Yeah,
need time to process.
yes.
There's a whole process going on of translating
Mm,
what you just said from their, into in their head. So they need time to process what you just said, digest what you just said, which does, if it's whatever you're talking about, you're an expert in what you do. That's going to take some time to
yes,
process,
yes,
and because you and I probably don't realize how much we know, and that's important to relay that to the audience and give them time to do that. So it allows them to process and digest what you just said, but it
mm,
also, that pause also mitigates the anxiety, but also allows you to gather your thoughts, process what you're about and what you're about to say next. So
mm.
that's really important. There's research being done, and I believe it's around 5 seconds, where people will start thinking that you're having a cardiac arrest after about 5 seconds of 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 pausing. Up until that point, they're with you.
There's a threshold.
There's there's a, after about 5 seconds, people will start. Is he okay? Is everything okay? Should we pause, cut? All that stuff. So yeah, so that's if so you use the pause, and it can be 2 or 3 seconds to take a breath. You can do it through the nose. You can do it silently, right? Just you and me now. This is what I'm like in the morning, I'm afraid, with just coffee. Just do a silent breath, right? This is really interesting. So if we just take a breath normally,
Yeah.
we make some noise, right? Either through the
Yeah.
nose or through the mouth. The breath is going to be going through all the cavities, of either nasally or orally. If you take a breath silently through the nose, right, we'll do it together. This is great for radio. So everybody listening or watching, here we go. Silent breath for 5 seconds. Go. You'll notice that there's a much more direct connection to the diaphragm and how the diaphragm is being utilized at that point.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to, and also it doesn't make any noise, so you can do
No.
this. Nobody will notice that you're
No.
taking a much deeper. So if you're in a Q&A and you're thinking, I've got no idea how to answer this question, or I've got to really think about how I answer this question, then do a silent breath through the nose. Nobody will know,
No.
and that will reset your your sympathetic nervous system.
Love it. Love it. And when you do that, because you're now connecting to your diaphragm, when you then speak again, the words that come out of your mouth, it'll have high levels of, I guess, credibility because you won't be speaking from the top of
Exactly.
your body. It'll be
That's right.
coming from deep within.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
So absolutely. I know where you're going on this. This is good. So yes. So then the control over that breath and how you use that breath from actually the abdominal muscles. So the diaphragmatic breathing is, again, going back to the controversy of voice pedagogy,
mm,
is not quite the correct term. It should be called abdominal breathing, because when we're
abdominal.
used, it's okay.
Yeah.
So the diaphragm is works on the inhale, so it contracts on the
Right.
inhale, allowing the lungs to expand in that process. So what you're doing when you're using the breath when speaking or singing is the abdominal muscles are engaging and pushing the diaphragm in and up, and therefore pushing the air out of the lungs.
Mm,
So that's what you're doing. But people, if you don't know how to use that, then you're not going to be able to create more dynamics, more
yes.
tonal variety, more
Yes.
pitch variety, right? So using the diaphragm, as I'm doing now, can give you different tones of voice and allow you to explore different areas of resonance in the body. And there are 7 areas of resonance in the body. And the combination of those resonance gives you what's called a balanced phonation.
Yeah.
And I use a upspeak at the end there because I want you to think about that. so there's a balanced phonation, and that is really a balance of breath and tone in the voice. And how we use that really determines how we're received in communication.
Yeah.
So a harsh sound from the throat. So if I was to speak completely from the throat now, it would be very much like that. Thanks for the call. Really appreciate your time. How things going today? I'm not going to do an Australian accent. When I first met my father-in-law, who's over here at the moment, and we talked about this at the beginning. My wife is Australian. She's from
Yeah.
Perth. And so when I first met my father-in-law, Alan, I did an Australian accent, and I said, "How would that go back at home, Alan? How would you feel about that?" And he said, "James, the boys would take you around the back, mate." So that solidified our relationship. But going back to the throat sound, so if we speak mainly from the throat,
Yeah.
we're creating, and a lot of people do. A lot of
Yes.
people come to me and I just speak from the throat. If I'm speaking all day, I'm on calls all day. It hurts after a
Mm,
while. Help me get out of this, right? So if you speak from the throat, it means that you're phonating from what's called the pharyngeal area, which is the back of the throat. And so we need to take the energy away from that. So if you do speak from there, it's going to hurt after a while. It's really hard to sustain for length of time. And what you're doing is you're causing too much vocal load. So you're pushing too much air over the vocal cords.
Hmm.
So that means that you're going to sound like I'm doing kind of an exaggerated impression here. I'm trying not to speak in an Australian accent, but that sort of sound, thanks for the call today. How is everything? How's your day been? And it's sort of not aggressive, but it can come across in a sort of a slightly distant, slightly arrogant, maybe alpha way,
Yeah,
and that's not what you want to achieve. So what you want to do is to lower the sound of your voice, which means that you can get into more of your chest resonance. You can make
yeah.
it a little bit more empathic. I do what's called the vicar voice. I'm going to get closer to the mic, and I do. This is my vicar voice. Thank you so much for coming, and do take a few. Don't feel obliged to give anything to the charity for today, but this is the sort of open sound that I'm talking about, which is really opening that chest resonance, that chest cavity, and getting into that kind of sound. Now, I wouldn't suggest that your listeners, if they're in sales, that they suddenly change their voice into that. But
Become
it's
the vicar. Anything under 50 pounds is not acceptable.
exactly, yeah. So it's manipulating. What you're doing is you're manipulating the muscles in the larynx
Yeah,
to change the tonal quality and the character and the color of the sound, really. And that by creating different areas, by creating more resonance in the body. So projection and tone is about resonance and not about volume. So projection is not about volume, it's about resonance. And tone is about creating and encouraging more resonance in the body.
yeah. So Jimmy, when you've got people coming to you with that sort of, I guess, predicament that I tend to be talking from the throat, my I talk all day, my throat's sore at the end of the day. It's really hard, and I don't seem to be getting the cut through and the credibility that I'd like to. Is there because I'm imagining that some people don't know how to talk from the abdomen, how to breathe appropriately. So
Yeah.
is there specific little tips or specific little strategies that people can try to implement to help
Yeah,
them that will
absolutely.
naturally start to increase their voice resonance?
Yes. So the first thing is to be able to, as you said before, is to control the outbreath. So shall I give you a couple of exercises to do?
Sure.
So
Love it.
okay, so you're going to like this one. This is good. So this is called well, we need to firstly be able to engage the abdominal muscles, right? That's the
Yeah.
first thing we should do. So what we're doing is we're creating what's called, this is very technical and boring, but we're creating what's called subglottal pressure, right? So the glottis is just below the vocal folds, and what we're doing is we're creating air pressure from the abdominal muscles to just under. I'm getting lots of beeps. People are disagreeing with me on my computer. That's wrong, Jimmy. No, no. That's my imposter syndrome, right, coming out. So so what a really great way to feel that energy is what's called a silent laugh. Okay, so I'm going to do this now, and hopefully you join in with me, Darren, because I know you will. You're already doing it right. So that laugh that you have a beautiful laugh. It's wonderful. And so that laugh, if you could suppress it for me, right? So as you're laughing, yeah, it's that the feeling of when you're rolling around the floor. Let me finish the sentence. When you're rolling around, when you're rolling around the floor in absolutely uncontrollable fits of laughter, right? Which hasn't happened for me for a long time, but that's wonderful feeling with your mates, and someone says something stupid, and
Mm.
and you're rolling around the floor in the lounge, and you've had a few tinnies. I'm sorry to be the cliche, and and it's like uncontrollable. But you stop, just stop, and you're like this, just. It's that feeling, right? So it's
Yes.
that energy that you're using. Now, when you're practicing, it has to be quite a lot. But when
Yeah.
you develop that muscle memory, that muscle strength from your core muscles, then you can use that energy to control the out breath. So what you're doing is you're taking the energy away from the larynx, the throat.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that I do is help people control that out breath. And it's amazing how much freer when you get that down, when
Mm.
you really, it takes a few days to just to control that out breath, how how freeing that feeling is of using your voice and how you can take the energy away from here. So that's the first thing that I do is to do that. There's another couple of ways. So if you I'm going to turn away from the microphone because this is very loud, but if I want you to feel that where the diaphragm is. So if you put your hand just below your solar plexus, about 2 inches below your solar plexus, and just up from the belly, kind of in the
Yeah.
middle, right?
Yeah.
And I want you to turn around. Imagine that you and I are in New York, and we're on Madison Avenue, and we're gonna hail a cab. Okay, so I'm going to turn away from the microphone, and we're going to take a breath, short breath, and then we're going to go hey, really hey like that, really loudly. I'll do it first. All right, here we go. Hey. Okay, you go for it.
Hey.
Good, good. So you need to do that from the abdominal muscles, right?
Yeah.
So instead
Yeah,
of from
I
what
could
you're doing at the
feel it
moment,
as I said that.
yeah.
I could
So
feel
if
almost
you
like a contraction.
exactly, yeah. So do that. Do the same thing again, but a slightly different exercise. Imagine that there's a like a rat or a cat or something come into and you're shushing it away, right? So your hand here again with me. You didn't think you'd be doing this today, did you? So I want you to think about the silent laugh, right? The energy that you when you're laughing like this uncontrollably, right? Good, right? And then close your mouth and imagine you're going to go shh. Well, you are going to do that, right? So that pressure that you're creating here, right? So we're going to do this. You don't have to look away actually, 'cause it's not very loud. So I want you to feel the pressure here, the energy here. I'll show you.
Yeah.
Do that with me. Go. Good. Good. Now,
Mm.
unfortunately your microphone's on because it doesn't matter, but your microphone's there. Can you feel it? Can you feel
Yeah,
where
I
the
can.
energy's coming
I
from?
can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It comes
Yeah.
from down here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's when you're speaking. When I speak, constantly, I'm using that energy all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing is if you're lacking motivation, right? So I told you that I last couple of days ago, Darren, I'm not a morning person. I can't do 6 in the morning, right? Can we make it a little bit later? I'm sorry, mate, right? I know that my energy is going to be low. I'm not awake, right? I happen to be, but I'm awake now because I'm teaching you about something that I'm passionate
Yes.
about. Not
Yes.
teaching you, sorry, that's patronizing, but I'm showing you something
Yeah,
that I'm
absolutely.
passionate about, right?
Yeah.
So that energy, as we're speaking, is going to come across in your speech and
Mm.
come across in your message.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Mate, I've just looked at the time
Oh,
and
you've
we've been
done
going an
3
hour.
hours. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe we should have got that Joe Rogan cigar
Yeah,
and just
exactly,
made it a
and a
marathon.
whiskey. Yeah, that's right.
I do have to close this up because I've got to get to a dinner engagement. So, um,
Absolutely.
can I thank you for what you've done today? Because it's been I work with a lot of people helping them with their voice, and some of the things you've shared today is new to me, particularly the 2 inches from your mouth and the cupping of the
Yep,
ear is a really, I can even now hear the difference. So
yeah.
that's really useful. For people listening to this who would like to learn a bit more about you and certainly connect with you,
Mm.
what's the best place for them to do that, Jimmy?
The easiest way to get hold of me is through my website, Darren, which is jimmycannon.com.
Okay, awesome. And if it's okay, I'll also put your LinkedIn handle up there, your LinkedIn
Yeah,
link.
absolutely, absolutely
And
fantastic. Yep.
your podcast, Master Your Voice,
Master Your Voice
it is
podcast is
back
on
or coming back?
is it yeah, I know it's definitely active. Yeah, no, I'm
It's
doing it every
back.
week.
All right.
Yep, absolutely back. And my YouTube channel is where most people find me, actually, is Jimmy Cannon public speaking coach, I believe, or Jimmy Cannon voice coach. But you've just put Jimmy Cannon
Yeah.
voice, you'll find me. Hopefully,
Brilliant.
otherwise I'm going to sack my SEO guy.
Yeah, that's fine. No, that's cool. I'll put all those in the show notes. So that's brilliant. Hey, thank you. I'm glad we got to connect. I'm glad we got to speak. I love the energy you brought and I love the information you shared. So my friend, thank you for being such a great guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Absolute pleasure, Darren.
Enjoy your Thursday. Yeah, it is Thursday. Yeah, just thinking, what day is it?
Yeah, well, no, who cares? Now, listen, wonderful. Thanks for your time. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks,
Thanks very
Jimmy.
much, Darren. Wonderful.
Cheers,
Speak
mate.
soon.